Five Nights at Freddy's sister location is known for having some pretty difficult gameplay. Difficulty-wise, 1020 mode is around the second hardest night in all of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, right behind Ultimate Custom Night's 5020 mode. And sure, while 5020 might be difficult, skill-wise it's not that hard. This is because most of the difficulty comes from the very start of the night, where you need to farm 10 coins in order to get the death coin. Then remove Funtime Foxy from the night, and you have to do all of that in around 20 to 30 seconds. But once you get consistent at this part, the rest of the night looks like this.
Oh crap. Yeah!
Sister Location's 1020 on the other hand, always has something going on, and while the difficulty isn't jam-packed into the start of the night, it is spread out evenly over the course of the night. Here's a random 10 seconds of Sister Location's gameplay. For being a less difficult mode, it's quite a difference. This is why I argue that this max mode is one of the best in the series. Its difficulty is balanced the whole way through, there is no stalling, and there are no obscure game mechanics that the player can use to gain an upper hand. This night is just pure raw skill and reaction, and that's what makes it so good. Fun fact, Scott had to make an update to the custom night because he felt the mode was impossible. He gave the player more power specifically on 1020. And for a while, it was thought that the original version was impossible. But not only is it possible, it's not too terribly difficult. Scott gave the player about 16% power, meaning if you can beat the current version with at least 16% remaining, you can do the pre-patch mode. Now, if you've been around my channel for long enough, you might have known that I've briefly played a game called Sister Location Super Custom Night. This is a remake of Sister Location that makes the game a lot smoother, snappier, and feels overall a lot better to play. One thing I cannot give credit for in the original game is how bad the scrolling felt in the office. Your mouse gets locked to the center of the screen in this really weird way, and it feels super bad to play. A quality of life feature that a lot of Sister Location remakes have is the ability to remove this custom cursor and have much more smooth scrolling. About 5 months ago, I decided to play 1020 mode on Super Custom Night. It took me about a day to beat it, and I was fairly happy about my victory, but that happiness was short-lived. I wasn't too proud of the power I had left over when beating the night, and if I wanted to play harder challenges, I really needed to improve. On top of that, many of the characters' mechanics were heavily changed, and it made the mode a lot easier than vanilla Sister Location. A few months later, I had beaten 1020 with over 20% power remaining, and a little while after, I decided to beat 1020 with the Hyper Mode Challenge, which basically super buffs every character, making them a lot faster. I was starting to get a lot better at Sister Location in general, but it wasn't enough for me. I knew I needed to get better if I wanted to beat this challenge, so finally, I decided to learn Shooter 25's SLCN. Previously, I talked about Funtime Gala Hard Mode, this game's max mode with everyone set to 20, with every character's hard mode enabled. This hard mode did things like make some characters slightly faster, disable quality of life features such as preventing the player from typing LOL on the keyboard for a little bit, and instead forcing them to use the keypad, and overall made the characters more difficult. The hardest part by far is removing some of the sound cues. You see, normally characters like Funtime Freddy, Bidybab, and Ennard are all sound cue reliant. This means for these characters, you typically use sound cues to determine when they're about to attack, meaning you didn't have to check the cameras at all to know if you're in danger. For example, Bidybab will have 2 voice lines and then will make a vent sound effect, and that's your cue to shut the door. Hard mode removes some of these sound cues. Funtime Freddy will no longer make footstep sound cues. Ennard's sound cues aren't directional, and Bidybab's sound cues are gone entirely. These changes make the gameplay a lot harder, but they're not too bad. Funtime Freddy still says a voice line when he switches sides, so he could still be tracked that way. And Ennard, while making you use the cameras to find him, is not hard once you can narrow down where he's at, since you could still use the sound cue to tell when he's gotten to the door. Bidybab is an exception, but as long as you frequently check on her, you'll be fine. But hard mode isn't the only thing that can be enabled. By typing in V hard on the menu, you unlock a challenge that strikes fear in any FNAF player's heart. Let me introduce you to Funtime Gala Very Hard Mode. we just went from hard mode to very hard mode. What's the big deal? How much harder can very hard mode possibly be? Well, to put things into perspective, the jump in difficulty from hard mode to very hard mode is arguably 2 to 3 times more than from normal to hard mode. This mode is so difficult that Shooter25 himself intended this to be the hardest challenge. This is the same guy that beat 1020 15 times in a row. And if he made the text say this, then I'm really in for a ride. And I really had no idea just what I was getting myself into. To understand why Funtime Gala Very Hard Mode is so insane, we first need to understand what Very Hard Mode does to each character. To understand this part, you'd have to have a general understanding of how each character works in this game. Luckily, most of the characters work exactly how they did in base sister location. And if you don't know how they work, then I'd highly recommend watching my other video on this game. Firstly, characters like Bidybab, Minarinas, Yendo, Lolbit, Ballora, Bonnet, and worst of all, Funtime Foxy are crazy fast now. The way their counters work is that every frame, one would get subtracted from their counter. Very hard mode makes it so that characters either start with shorter counters or an extra 0.2 gets subtracted from their counter, making them 20% faster. I'm going to talk about how every character works in very hard mode. If you're not really interested in AI values and numbers, you can skip to here where I talk about beating the game. So let's start with the characters who were speed buffed. Ballora will now take 2.5 to 3.5 seconds to move between your stages. This means she can kill you in as quick as 10 seconds. Bidybab progresses every 3.2 to 4.8 seconds, and she could kill you as quick as 14 seconds. Minarinas will drain oxygen 20% faster, meaning once you let them fully drain oxygen, it's pretty much over. It's so hard to salvage it when this happens. Yendo spawns every 3 to 5 seconds, Lolbit can fully attack you in as quick as 18 seconds, and Bonnet spawns every 3.5 to 6 seconds. Trust me, Bonnet is very annoying in this mode, because as soon as she spawns, you have to be extremely quick or just drop everything and click her nose. Minarinas will all spawn on your face at the start of the night and will always be laughing. They make it really difficult to hear and nearly impossible to see. Electrobab will add a whopping 2 bars of usage if left unchecked. This is insane, and it's the same as having 2 doors closed at the same time. If you don't deal with him fast enough, your power will be absolutely cooked. Speaking of power, Baby will say 2 numbers every 3.5 to 6 seconds, and you must type these numbers on your keyboard. If you mistype these numbers at all, or if you fail to do so within 3.2 seconds, she drains all of your power. This is an absolute run killer, and this has killed me many times. Her sound cue is so incredibly quiet that it's hard to hear her amongst all the other chaos that's going on, and I've had many times where I've powered out late with really good power. No! What fucking number was it? What fucking number was it? My power is so fucking good. Funtime Foxy is incredibly fast. You have to constantly checking to reset his timer. He can attack in as quick as 20 seconds and subtracts this amount from his counter every frame. This number here is the amount of frames you haven't watched him on the cameras, which resets back to 0 every time you look at his camera. He is fast, like crazy fast. If you don't watch him at all, this is what he looks like. Funtime Freddy has no more sound cues. He still says his attack voice lines, but any other sound cue does not play. This means every time he attacks, you have to find him on the cameras. The best way to deal with him is to check one of the closets. If he's there, you know he's attacking that side. And if he's not there, you know he's attacking the opposite side. Before, he would wait for any sound cue to finish before attacking. The problem now is that he doesn't have any sound cues. This means he can silently switch sides and immediately announce an attack. This makes him really difficult to predict, and most of the time you have no choice but to find him on the cameras. Finally, we have Ennard, who carries this entire mode. Ennard works exactly like he did in the private room boss fight. He'll get to your door at around 12 to 18 seconds and will give you 5 seconds for you to close the door on him. The problem is that he only goes away after the 5 seconds are over and not before. This means if you shut the door as soon as he gets to it, you're going to end up keeping the door shut for the full 5 seconds and wasting a lot of power. Instead, it's best to wait just until the 5 seconds is about to end and then close the door. Ennard still requires you to have the door closed for at least 2 seconds, so open the door as soon as you hear him leave. The problem with very hard mode is that he has absolutely 0 sound cues. Do you want to find which side he's on? You have to use the cameras. Do you want to see when he got to the door? You have to use the cameras. It's so difficult to gauge how long Ennard has been at the door and when you should properly shut it, to where you either end up dying to him or closing the door for too long and wasting a lot of power. And that's another thing. Power is incredibly tight in this game. If you have 2 bars of usage the whole night, so if you spend the entirety night on the cams without having a single door closed, you wouldn't even have enough power to make it through the night, and you'll power out just before 6 AM. Without the tight power, this gameplay would only place this mode around top 30 on the max mode list. With the tight power, this mode places number 10 on the list. This means that this FNAF challenge is ranked the 10th hardest main challenge of all time. Yeah. So how exactly does one go about beating this challenge? Well, firstly, you must have a really good understanding of the game. For this, I'd recommend beating Funtime Gala normal and hard mode. I've made a video on both of those, so you can check it out if you want to. At the start of the night, you want to flip up cams about 2 to 3 times, since it increases 20% faster. At this point, Baby will have said some numbers, and Yendo, Bonnet, and Lolbit would have spawned. Deal with Yendo, click Bonnet, do Lolbit, and flip up cams one last time for Foxy. When you do this, make sure to press S on your keyboard, and then hover your mouse over the button. This way, you're only on cams for 1 frame, and you conserve as much power as possible. It might not sound like a big deal, but in this mode, every fraction of a percent counts. After you deal with the office characters, Funtime Freddy would have attacked. As soon as you hear him, shock main arenas, check one of the closets, check the vent for Bidybab, and then find Ennard. At this time, Electrobab would have spawned. Shock him, switch back to cam 7, and deal with Funtime Freddy. If you saw Bidybab in the vent, close the door on her. Then, close the door for Ennard and Funtime Foxy. This is only for the start of the night. After this, everything plays out completely differently. All you need to do is react to characters. Since mini arenas are permanent, you want to make sure you shock them every couple of seconds. If you don't do this often, your oxygen will completely drain and your screen will go black. It's really good to learn this motion where I flick to cam 6, shock, and switch back to cam 7. You want to spend as little time on the cameras since office characters are really fast. You have to be really quick with Lolbit, and especially with Bonnet. There were so many times where Bonnet would spawn where I needed to shock Electrobab, and I'd end up having to drop everything to click her nose, or shocking anyway and completely missing her. You also don't want to spend too much time in the office. Mini arenas are fast, and you always have to know where Ennard, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Bidybab are. Bidybab isn't too difficult though. You just want to make sure to constantly check her, and shut the door about every 14 seconds. With enough playing this mode, you'll be able to tell when Bidybab has reached the door with game sense. And trust me, if you decide to do this challenge, you will spend a lot of time on it. Now, dealing with the characters is one thing, but saving power is another. I was really struggling with power on this mode. I would power out before 3 AM because I was being so inefficient. Well, hopefully I get good enough at saving power to where I won't die at 5 AM. Right? Okay, so here are the biggest tips to save power. Firstly, shock Electrobab as soon as he spawns. Aside from door characters, he is top priority. You want to avoid him spiking your usage as much as possible. You also want to avoid stacking usage at all times. If you find yourself in a situation where you can close a door without being on cams, do that. Many characters can be dealt with one at a time. For example, Ballora is a lot more lenient than you think. I dealt with Ballora, Funtime Freddy, and then Bidybab instead of closing all 3 doors at the same time. This is crucial for saving power. You also want to get good at closing doors for as short as possible. For Funtime Freddy, for example, you can wait until the sound cue is almost over to very quickly shut the door. And with enough time, you'll get good at this. With Ennard, you want to always be tracking him and know when he got to the door so you can close it at the very last second. This is a lot harder than it sounds, but here are some tips you can use to track exactly where he is. Firstly though, you need to know how characters can stall each other. For example, if Ballora is attacking the right side and Ennard shows up, he can't actually progress until Ballora is gone. This means as soon as Ballora leaves, Ennard will reach the door. This makes it so you don't necessarily have to watch him on the cameras. This is the same thing if Bidybab is in the vent. Also, Ballora, Funtime Foxy, and Bidybab will not attack if Ennard is there, and instead wait until he leaves. Knowing this is very important, since Funtime Foxy can leave the camera, but will not actually attack the door until Ennard or Ballora have left. This also applies if Ennard is in stage 1. Funtime Freddy is the only character who doesn't stall anyone or who doesn't get stalled. He simply doesn't care. This mode requires some incredibly fast speed and a heavy amount of game knowledge. Being able to manage all the characters is one thing, but saving power is a whole other thing. So how exactly was I doing with this mode? Well, I had beaten Funtime Gala hard mode with over 11% remaining, but that didn't matter. This mode plays so differently, and it was really difficult to get used to. The first couple of hours spent on this mode were just learning how everyone worked. It was only after about 6 hours that I got my first run past 3 AM, but I had absolutely no power. I was also really struggling with shocking cameras. I would shock Electrobab, misclick cam 6, shock again, and lose power. The best way I've found to get around this is to shock Minarinas first and then shock Electrobab. This motion was also a lot better for my wrist, and it felt a whole lot more natural to do. One other thing was learning how to flick between the bottom 3 cameras. This motion felt super unnatural to me, and instead what I decided to do was try and narrow down where Ennard was. I would choose one of the hallways and then check the vent. If I didn't see Ennard at all, I would note to check the other hallway on the next cam cycle. Then I would try to see if he's being stalled by any other character. If not, I would just keep checking him to see when he's gotten to the door. I was getting better at saving power, but it wasn't enough. I had gotten my first 5 AM death just barely into 5 AM. Gradually though, I slowly started getting better times. I was getting better at saving power, and I powered out at 521. And then at 540. Okay. I knew this was it. If I could step up my game, I could power out late into 550 and beat the night. Unfortunately, I didn't get so lucky. If you power out right after dealing with everyone, you could survive for quite a few seconds. I got to 5 minutes and 50 seconds, but there was a problem. I had 0% power. On top of that, Ballora was at the door. I hoped that if I could close the door for long enough, she could leave. I could power out and beat the night. But then, this happened.
Oh my god, bro. Oh my god. Dude, what? What? Oh my god, bro.
Maybe. I didn't have enough power to keep the door closed long enough, and I powered out and died. This is why I said before that every fraction of a percent counts. If I just had a little more power, I would have beaten the night. Unfortunately, I didn't. A couple of runs later, I found myself at 5 AM again. I was super nervous, but my power was not too bad. I was at around 5 minutes and 50 seconds. I only had 10 seconds left to go. I powered out again, but this time I had dealt with everyone. Everyone except for Bidybab. I powered out and sat there hoping Bidybab wouldn't kill me, that I could just make it to the end of the night. But then...
No. Oh my god, bro. 2 seconds. 2 seconds.
I died almost 1 second from beating the night. I always say it. If I've gotten to this point once, I can get to it again. But this challenge mentally broke me. Dying so close to the end not once, but 2 times felt horrible. On top of that, I had pressured myself into beating this challenge, since it was almost being pushed out of the top 10. I wanted to prove to everyone that I could beat a top 10. Nothing mattered anymore. No matter how much I stopped enjoying this mode, I knew I had to save power as much as I could. I needed to do anything if it meant not powering out. So a few attempts later, I did this. I had gotten to 5 AM with 20% power. This pace was insane. For reference, you need to have at least 16% to be able to beat the night. I had 4% above the requirement. Please let this be the time I beat the night. Don't let me sell to a random character. Don't mistype any of baby's numbers. This could be the attempt.
What? 2%? Holy sh! What? Yo! What? Dude, what? What was that green run?
I had officially beaten a top 10 max mode and have proven to everyone that I can beat a top 10. Something I've wanted for quite a while now. As much as this whole challenge has broken me, it was so rewarding seeing the exotic butters on my menu. I want to thank everyone who has helped me with this challenge in any sort of way. Whether you were there to support me, or whether you directly gave me tips on the game. Thank you all, and of course, thank you for watching. This video has been in the making for quite a while, about 2 months to be specific, so it would really mean the world for me if you could subscribe. I have a few more things for you all in the future, but for now, this is it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in another video.